The UK is one of the global leaders in antimicrobial resistance, particularly in smaller companies and biotech. So I think the research base is there. The UK government is receptive and supportive, but globally there are a lot of incentives and calls for new drugs such as XF drugs to be developed. Our lead XF drug development is for a compound called XF73. We're currently in clinical development for this compound to kill bacteria that's carried in your nose. That is the major cause of post-surgical infection in hospitals around the world. Around a third of the population carry bacteria that can cause potentially fatal infections post-surgery. So our lead drug is designed to kill that bacteria prior to surgery and to drastically reduce the post-surgical infection rate from bacteria such as MRSA. XF drugs have been shown to be active against 9 of the 12 most important superbugs causing infections in hospitals worldwide. In industry standard tests which examine the potential emergence of resistance to antibiotics from bacteria like MRSA, we have seen that particular superbug become resistant in as few as 3 exposures to traditional antibiotics. However, remarkably, with XF73, we have never seen MRSA become resistant to XF73's action, even after 55 repeat exposures. At the end of the day, modern medicine is based on the need for antibiotics, and without them, as I say, we're going back to the dark ages.
So antimicrobial resistance is a real and current threat. It threatens things that we've taken for granted. What people also don't talk about often is the surgical and medical procedures which are enabled by antibiotics. So things like just simple routine surgery would become very dangerous if resistant pathogens became more common. We think narrow spectrum antibiotics are very important. With a narrow spectrum agent, you can afford a new type of antibiotic stewardship. You give the narrow spectrum agent when you know you've got an infection due to that pathogen. At Summit Therapeutics, we are producing antibiotics of precision. We have 2 programs. One is a drug called ridinilazole for Clostridium difficile infection. This is an infection that occurs normally after you've had antibiotics for other reasons. Ridinilazole has already been shown to be very effective both in treating the infection but also in reducing recurrence, which is the key issue. The other area is in gonorrhea, and we have programs emerging from discovery to treat gonorrhea. These are new mechanisms of action, and they are again precision antibiotics that will be active against all types of gonorrhea, but in particular gonorrhea, which is proving to be resistant and is a global threat.
Reactive oxygen is naturally occurring basically as a defense mechanism, a stimulating mechanism, but what we're doing in Matoki is actually harnessing that reactive oxygen by putting it into a synthetic formulation where we're looking to release optimal concentrations, first and foremost to kill bacteria. There's evidence this reactive oxygen will regenerate tissue, and also in the microbiological setting is that it does penetrate biofilm and consequently gets to the bugs and kills them. The complex polymicrobial skin lesion manifests itself in, for example, diabetic foot infections, and in some instances, particularly with advanced diabetes, that is a horror, because simply you can't get systemic antibiotics through the normal vasculature. There's just no blood supply to that infection. Ultimately, the clinical offering, we believe, for it to be meaningful in this setting, is that we can get the wounds healed quicker. So, for example, in some of these chronic wounds, you're talking about 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, maybe more. So if we can take off days, hopefully weeks, from the current standard of care, I think you can imagine that it'll be extremely benefit, not just clinically to the patient, but also economically to the system. We believe that this technology has ability to spare antibiotics, and by doing so, is obviously to retain their utility, and hopefully, ultimately, is to reduce the burden of resistance. Yeah, because if you don't use the antibiotic, then you're not putting pressure on the development of resistance.